The courtroom was heavy with tension, the kind that could only come from a truth lingering in the air, waiting to be revealed. Judge Morris slammed the gavel, signaling the end of the day's proceedings, and the murmurs of the crowd began to swell. Detective Sarah Locke sat at the back, reviewing her notes. She had heard the details of the case too many times, but something gnawed at her. The victim's family had been denied justice for years, their pain swept aside like dust. But now, the only witness, Jasmine Ellis, had something crucial to share. The weight of the testimony she was about to give would change everything, but at what cost? Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this moment might finally crack the case open, or bury it even deeper. The next morning, Sarah Locke found herself at the office, sifting through her notes. Her mind kept returning to the same thought. Jasmine Ellis's testimony was the missing piece. It was too vital to be ignored. Yet, as Sarah reviewed the evidence, she couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that something was off. The pieces weren't fitting as neatly as they should. Something didn't add up. The deeper she dug into the case, the more tangled it became. She knew she couldn't rely solely on Jasmine's account, not without confirmation. She needed more answers. But where would she find them? As Sarah Locke leaned back in her chair, the weight of the investigation pressed down on her shoulders. The more she thought about Jasmine Ellis's words, the more her doubts grew. Jasmine had been hesitant, fearful even. But there was a crack in her story, something left unsaid. The defense had already started poking holes in her testimony, and Sarah knew it was only a matter of time before the truth would be twisted. The truth was like a fragile thread that could snap at any moment. But Sarah couldn't let this case slip through her fingers. She couldn't allow Jasmine's voice to be drowned out by the noise of the courtroom. If there was one thing Sarah knew, it was that justice couldn't wait. As her fingers hovered over her phone, she knew who she needed to talk to next. The call to Jasmine Ellis didn't go as Sarah had hoped. Jasmine was more nervous than before, her voice wavering on the edge of panic. She had been avoiding Sarah's calls, but now, as the stakes rose, the truth was becoming too heavy to carry alone. It was clear, Jasmine knew something she wasn't telling. Sarah pushed gently, coaxing Jasmine to open up, but the witness was skittish, afraid of what would happen if she spoke too much. There was something bigger at play here, something that Jasmine had seen or experienced. But Sarah had to tread carefully. Pushing too hard might break the fragile trust that was slowly forming. "I need your help, Jasmine," Sarah said softly. "This isn't just about the case. This is about making sure you're safe." But the line went quiet for a moment before Jasmine whispered her final words. "You're not the only one looking for the truth, detective." The next morning, Sarah met with Officer Tom Fields, her partner on the case. They sat across from each other at a small cafe, the din of the outside world just faintly entering their bubble of conversation. Sarah recounted the call with Jasmine Ellis, the growing unease in her voice. Tom listened carefully, his eyes scanning the crowd. "You think she knows more than she's saying?" he asked, his voice low. Sarah nodded. There was something about Jasmine's fear, the way she hesitated, that told her there was more buried beneath the surface. "She's hiding something, Tom, something dangerous." But Tom wasn't so sure. "Or she's afraid of something more than just a trial," he replied, taking a sip of his coffee. "What if someone's watching her? Someone powerful?" Sarah paused. That was the thought she had been avoiding. If the truth was this dangerous, who else might be involved? After their conversation at the cafe, Sarah Locke couldn't shake the feeling that she was getting closer to the heart of the mystery. She drove to the courthouse, the weight of the case pressing on her shoulders. As she walked through the corridors of the building, her mind raced. Jasmine Ellis was hiding something, and Sarah could feel it in her gut. The trial was growing more complex, with every testimony pointing in different directions. Sarah needed clarity, something that could piece this puzzle together. Her thoughts were interrupted when Tom Fields called her. "Meet me at the old warehouse on 5th Street. I found something." The line went dead, and Sarah knew this could be the breakthrough they'd been waiting for. At the warehouse, Tom was waiting by an abandoned car, a stack of papers in his hand. He motioned for Sarah to come closer. "You need to see this," he said, his voice low. Sarah took the papers from him, scanning the documents quickly. It was an old police report, one that referenced a suspect, linked to the case they were investigating. A suspect who had ties to Jasmine Ellis's family. "Why didn't we know about this?" Sarah asked, her voice rising in disbelief. Tom shook his head. "I don't know. It looks like someone tried to bury it." Sarah looked at the papers again, a new layer of suspicion forming. It was clear. There were people out there who didn't want the truth to come out. But who? The discovery at the warehouse felt like a step closer to the truth. But Sarah knew the battle wasn't over. The more they uncovered, the more complicated everything became. Jasmine Ellis's involvement, her family's past, it all began to overlap in dangerous ways. Sarah couldn't trust anyone completely anymore, not even Tom. As they continued their investigation, a chilling thought crossed her mind. Was the truth really what they were searching for? Or was it just a tool, a weapon for someone to control? She decided to go back to Jasmine Ellis. Maybe now, after everything they had uncovered, she would speak freely. Back at Jasmine Ellis's apartment, Sarah found her sitting on the floor, staring blankly at the wall. Jasmine had been expecting her, but the vulnerability in her eyes was something Sarah hadn't anticipated. The woman who had once been so guarded now seemed broken. Jasmine looked up as Sarah entered, her voice barely a whisper. "I know what you're looking for, but I'm not sure I can help you." Sarah crouched down, her voice gentle. "You're the key to this, Jasmine. You have to trust me, tell me everything." For a moment, Jasmine hesitated, but then in a quiet voice, she finally began to reveal the truth. Everything she had kept hidden for so long. As Jasmine Ellis spoke, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Sarah listened carefully, her heart pounding as the story unfolded. Jasmine told her of a secret deal made long ago, one that involved powerful people willing to silence anyone who threatened to expose the truth. The whispers of corruption that had once been vague rumors now had a face. Sarah knew that the road ahead would be dangerous, that there were forces at play far more powerful than she could have ever imagined. But one thing was clear. The only way to expose the truth was to go through the people who had buried it. Sarah wasn't backing down now. The air around Sarah Locke grew heavy as she left Jasmine Ellis's apartment. The pieces were falling together, but they only made the picture darker. Every step forward felt like a step deeper into a shadowy labyrinth. Sarah had no choice but to go public, but she knew that would come at a cost. Tom Fields had warned her about the dangers of exposing too much too quickly. Yet Sarah felt a surge of determination. The truth had to come out, no matter the risk. She reached for her phone and dialed the one person who might still be able to help, the judge. But as the phone rang, a voice echoed in her mind. Was the judge on her side? Or was she being pulled into a web of deceit? Tom Fields was waiting for Sarah when she returned to the office. He was pacing, looking agitated, like he had something important to say. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier, Sarah," he began. "The more I look into Jasmine Ellis' past, the more I find myself questioning her story. There's something she's not telling us." Sarah frowned, glancing at the papers spread across her desk. "What do you mean?" "She told me everything." But Tom shook his head. "Not everything. You need to dig deeper into her past, especially her family. They've been connected to some powerful people." Sarah paused, her mind racing. "I'll do it," she said. "But we need to be careful. If we go too far, we could be playing into someone's hands." Later that night, Sarah Locke sat in front of her computer, her eyes scanning the old case files she had pulled from the courthouse archives. The more she read, the more a pattern emerged. Jasmine Ellis's family was connected to a series of unsolved cases, all linked by one thread, a powerful political figure who had a lot to lose if the truth came to light. Sarah's mind raced as the pieces clicked into place. This wasn't just about a missing person. It was about a corrupt system that had protected the guilty for far too long. But who could Sarah trust now? Everyone seemed to have their own agenda, and the deeper she dug, the more dangerous her investigation became. The next morning, Sarah met with the judge in a secluded cafe on the edge of town. The judge was a trusted ally, someone who had fought for justice before, but Sarah was uncertain whether this time would be different. The judge looked at her with a mix of concern and resolve. "You're treading on dangerous ground, Sarah," they said quietly. "The people involved in this case are powerful. They'll do anything to keep the truth hidden. I've seen it happen before." Sarah's voice was steady as she replied, "I can't back down now. The truth needs to come out, no matter what it costs." The judge sighed deeply, their gaze drifting out the window. "Just be careful. I'll support you, but this battle won't be won with just one voice." As Sarah left the cafe, a feeling of unease settled over her. She had the support of the judge, but she knew the road ahead would be filled with obstacles. The people she was up against weren't just interested in protecting secrets. They were willing to destroy anyone who got in their way. Sarah felt a rush of resolve as she made her way back to the office. She wasn't going to let them win. As she entered the building, her phone buzzed with a message from Tom. "Meet me at the old storage unit. It's time we end this." The words echoed in her mind as she gathered her things. She was walking into the lion's den. But there was no turning back now. The dimly lit storage unit was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos Sarah Locke felt inside. Tom Fields had promised this was the breakthrough she'd been waiting for. As she stepped inside, she noticed the heavy lock on the door, an indication that whatever secrets it held had been hidden for years. Tom stood at the far end of the room, holding an old box, his face tense with anticipation. "We found it," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Sarah's heart raced. What was inside? Tom handed her the box. "This could change everything," he added. With trembling hands, Sarah opened it, revealing a series of documents and photographs that would expose the very people who had orchestrated the corruption. The photographs inside the box revealed more than Sarah could have imagined. Faces she recognized from years ago, hidden in the shadows of a story she thought was long buried. Tom's voice broke through her stunned silence. "They were all in on it. The people you've trusted, the ones who told you to keep quiet. They were the ones pulling the strings." Sarah felt a wave of betrayal wash over her, but underneath, a simmering anger began to rise. She wasn't going to let them get away with it. As she held the photographs in her hands, she knew the next step. This information had to be exposed, but it came with a risk, one that might cost her everything. Sarah and Tom left the storage unit in silence, each weighed down by the magnitude of what they had uncovered. As they walked to the car, Sarah could feel the oppressive weight of their discovery. Tom spoke first, his voice low and careful. "We need to go public with this, Sarah. There's no turning back now." But Sarah hesitated, her mind racing. "If we do this, they'll come after us. They'll do everything they can to silence us." Tom nodded gravely. "But we can't let them control the story. If we expose them now, we stand a chance at taking them down." Sarah took a deep breath. This was it. The point of no return. Her decision now would define everything that followed. The press conference was set for the next morning. Sarah stood backstage, her heart pounding in her chest as she prepared to face the world that had been blinded by lies and deceit. Tom stood beside her, offering silent support. "You're ready," he said, his voice steady. Sarah nodded, but inside, her nerves were on edge. She knew the risks, but the weight of justice pushed her forward. She couldn't let the truth die in the shadows. As the doors opened and the bright lights flooded the stage, Sarah stepped into the spotlight, ready to face the world and reveal the corruption that had been allowed to fester for too long. The room was filled with the buzzing of reporters and cameras, flashing as Sarah Locke stood at the podium, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "The truth has been hidden for far too long," she began, her words cutting through the noise. "But today, that ends. The people responsible for the corruption, the lies and the cover-ups will be held accountable." As she spoke, she saw faces in the crowd, some supportive, some skeptical. But the damage had been done. The truth was out, and nothing would be the same again. Sarah knew that the fight had only just begun, but for the first time she felt like she had a fighting chance. The media storm had begun. Sarah Locke sat in her apartment, staring at the TV screen, the images of her press conference playing on a loop. The room felt smaller now, as if the walls were closing in. She had done it, but the world was watching, waiting for her next move. Her phone buzzed with notifications, texts, and calls. Some from people congratulating her, others from anonymous sources warning her to back down. Tom Fields walked in, his face tense. "We have to be careful," he said. "They're already moving against you." Sarah turned to him, her face hard. "Let them come. I'm not backing down now." The next day, Sarah Locke found herself walking through the courthouse, the weight of the world bearing down on her shoulders. People whispered as she passed, some with admiration, others with suspicion. Tom Fields was with her, but it was clear that their fight had just begun. The courtroom was packed, the judge's gavel echoed, and the trial was underway. Sarah took her seat, her heart racing, knowing that everything hinged on what happened next. She couldn't help but feel the eyes of everyone in the room upon her, the pressure suffocating. But she had a job to do, and she was determined to finish it. Inside the courtroom, Sarah Locke sat facing the defense team, a group of high-powered lawyers who represented the powerful forces she had uncovered. They were well-dressed, calm, and prepared. Sarah could feel their eyes scanning her, assessing her every move. The prosecutor stood up, but it was Sarah who was the center of attention now. She had to prove that the truth was stronger than their lies. As she took the stand, her voice shook, but only for a moment. The words she spoke held the weight of everything she had fought for. "The truth is here, and no amount of money or power can change that," she said, her eyes fixed on the defense. The cross-examination had begun. Sarah Locke felt the sharp sting of the defense lawyers' questions, each one designed to discredit her, to undermine the truth she had fought so hard to expose. "You have no concrete proof," the lawyer sneered. "Just words, no facts." Sarah held her ground, her voice steady. "The facts are there if you choose to see them." The defense lawyer smiled coldly, but Sarah could see through the facade. She had no intention of letting them twist the truth. The courtroom was a battlefield, and she was ready for war. The trial continued late into the evening, but Sarah Locke knew that the defense was losing ground. The truth she had unearthed was too powerful, and the cracks in the lies were becoming more visible. As the day ended, she found herself in the hallway, her mind racing with the enormity of the battle ahead. Tom Fields joined her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You've done it, Sarah," he said, his voice filled with quiet pride. But Sarah knew the fight was far from over. There were still many who would stop at nothing to bury the truth. But for the first time in a long while, she felt hope. The truth was out, and it would never be silenced again. The morning after the trial, Sarah Locke woke up to the ringing of her phone. She squinted at the time, far too early. As she answered, her heart sank. It was the prosecutor, telling her there had been a new development. Sarah took a deep breath. "What happened?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "We've just uncovered new evidence," the prosecutor replied. "But someone tried to destroy it. Someone inside our team." Sarah clenched her fists. The betrayal was closer than she had thought. But she wasn't going to let it stop her. She couldn't. Not now. Back in the courthouse, the final day of the trial had arrived. Sarah Locke knew that everything was about to be decided. As she walked into the courtroom, her steps were steady, but her heart was a storm. She sat at the defendant's table, knowing the forces aligned against her. Tom Fields was with her, but even his calm demeanor couldn't erase the gnawing feeling in her gut. The defense had grown more aggressive, more desperate. They had everything to lose. But so did she. The gavel fell, and the trial began again. The final witnesses had taken the stand. Sarah Locke sat in silence as they recounted the facts, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. But as the last witness left the stand, something shifted in the atmosphere. The defense lawyers stood up, their voice calm but dangerous. "You've seen the evidence," they said. "But what about the witness? Who are they really? Can we trust them?" The question hung in the air like a poison. Sarah Locke's heart raced. The whispering began. A single voice could change everything. But would it? Sarah Locke felt her pulse quicken. She knew they were trying to discredit her, to plant doubt in the jury's mind. But something was different this time. She stood up and addressed the court, her voice steady and clear. "You want to question my credibility?" she said, her words cutting through the silence. "Then ask the real question. What are they trying to hide? What lengths are they willing to go to keep the truth from you?" She turned to the jury. "The truth is there in front of you. Don't let them distract you from it." The courtroom fell silent, the air thick with the weight of her words. The judge called for a recess, and Sarah Locke found herself standing in the hallway outside the courtroom. Tom Fields was beside her, but neither of them spoke for a moment. Sarah's mind raced, the weight of the trial crushing her chest. "We've done everything we can," Tom said quietly, breaking the silence. "It's out of our hands now." Sarah looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of exhaustion and determination. "No," she said firmly. "It's not out of our hands. Not yet." The final day of the trial had arrived. Sarah Locke sat at her table, her heart pounding as the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. The judge's gavel struck sharply, signaling the beginning of the end. The defense had thrown everything they had, trying to discredit the witness, trying to twist every word. But Sarah was unwavering. Her mind went back to the moments leading up to this, the long nights spent researching, the silent whispers of truth that had guided her here. She stood as the judge asked for the closing statements, her voice steady, cutting through the murmur. "The truth is not a favor we ask for. It is a right we fight for." Sarah Locke returned to her seat as the defense lawyer took their turn. But something felt different now. The air was heavy, the tension mounting with each word they spoke. It was as if the battle was already won, the pieces falling into place. When the defense finished, the judge called for a recess. The room emptied, and Sarah was left alone with her thoughts. The silence was unbearable. Tom stood by her side, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You did everything you could," he said softly. But Sarah knew it was more than that. It was about justice. It was about finding the truth. The jury deliberated for hours. Sarah Locke felt like a lifetime had passed as she awaited the verdict. Each minute stretched on forever. But finally, the doors opened. The jury filed in, their faces unreadable. The tension was palpable. The judge stood, calling for silence. "The jury has reached a verdict." Sarah felt her chest tighten. This was it. Everything she had fought for, everything she had endured, was about to be decided in a single moment. The judge looked down at the paper in his hands, and then up at Sarah. "We find the defendant guilty as charged." As the verdict was read, Sarah Locke felt a wave of relief wash over her. Justice had been served, but it was a bittersweet victory. She had fought for the truth, but the cost had been high. Tom Fields came to her side, his face soft with understanding. "You did it," he said quietly. "Justice was served." Sarah nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. She thought of the witnesses, the people whose lives had been changed by the truth. It wasn't just about the case. It was about something bigger, something deeper. This was the beginning, not the end. As Sarah Locke walked away from the courthouse, she could hear the whispers of the crowd around her. The case was over, but the truth was still being spoken. Her phone buzzed, another call, another step toward the future. But Sarah wasn't interested in the fame, the headlines. It wasn't about that. It was about the people, the lives changed by a single voice, the ones who believed, the ones who stood with her. She paused for a moment, looking back at the courthouse. The fight wasn't over. The fight would never truly end. But for now, justice had been served.